My buddy Derek made $95,000 a year and checked his bank account with a knot in his stomach. My neighbor Phil made $52,000 and checked his with complete calm. Same city, same neighborhood, similar rent. Phil had 18 months of expenses saved and was investing 20% of every paycheck. Derek had less than $800. I watched this for 2 years before I finally asked Phil what he was doing differently. His answer was 4 sentences long. I have been thinking about those 4 sentences ever since. My name is Tom, and I spent most of my 20s being Derek. And what I found when I finally started paying attention was that the gap between those two guys had almost nothing to do with income, and everything to do with a set of rules that most people never learn because nobody teaches them. Morgan Housel wrote in The Psychology of Money that wealth is the cars not purchased, the diamonds not bought, the upgrades declined. Wealth is what you do not see. And that sentence broke something open in my brain because I had been measuring financial success completely backwards my entire life. If you are someone who earns decent money but cannot figure out where it goes, hit that subscribe button because this is the conversation I wish someone had with me 10 years earlier. Here is the first thing you need to understand before any of the rules make sense. Everything you own costs money twice. The first cost is obvious, the price on the receipt. The second cost is what most people never add up, and it is often larger than the first. Storage, maintenance, insurance, mental load, and opportunity cost. Vicki Robin called it life energy in her book Your Money or Your Life, one of the most important books written on this subject. Every object represents hours of your life you traded to own it, plus the ongoing hours you trade to keep owning it. Here is what that looks like in real numbers. A treadmill takes up roughly 20 square feet of floor space. Assuming floor space costs somewhere in the range of $30 to $50 per square foot annually in most urban rental markets, which is a reasonable back-of-envelope estimate, you are paying $600 to $1,000 a year in implicit rent to store exercise equipment that probably holds clothes most days. That is before a single maintenance cost. A boat, which is one of the most financially destructive things a middle-class person can own, runs annual maintenance costs of roughly 10% of its value according to industry estimates. A $30,000 boat costs you $3,000 a year even if it never leaves the driveway. And research from Princeton and UCLA links visual clutter to reduced focus and higher stress hormone levels. Your stuff is making you less sharp and more anxious in ways you cannot consciously perceive. The opportunity cost is the one that stings the most. $15,000 sitting in a home gym setup that gets used twice a month is $15,000 that could have been in index funds, growing to roughly $45,000 to $55,000 over 15 years at 8 to 9% annual returns. You did not just buy a home gym, you bought it instead of a piece of your future. Minimalists are not people who hate nice things. They are people who have done this math and decided that most things are not worth it once you account for the full price. Rule 1. Calculate cost per use before you buy anything. Divide the total price by the realistic number of times you will actually use the thing. Not the optimistic number, the honest one. A $200 jacket worn twice costs $100 per wear. A $400 jacket worn 200 times costs $2 per wear. The more expensive jacket is actually cheaper in any meaningful sense of that word. A $1,500 espresso machine used daily for 5 years costs less than $1 per use and almost certainly saves money versus coffee shop visits. That $200 kitchen gadget you will use 3 times a year costs $60 per use in year 1 alone. The math kills most impulse purchases before they happen, which is the point. Rule 2. Apply what I call the disappearance test to everything you already own. Walk through your home and ask one question about each item. If this disappeared today, would I spend money to replace it? Be genuinely honest. Would you replace the fondue set? The bread maker? The clothes you have not touched in 14 months? For most items, the answer is no, you would not. Which means those items have negative value right now. They cost you space and mental load and give you nothing back. Greg McKeown, in his book Essentialism, makes the point that the word priority was singular for 500 years. Priorities, plural, did not exist as a concept until relatively recently. We invented the idea that we could have dozens of things that all mattered equally. The disappearance test forces you back to the singular. It reveals what actually matters versus what just accumulated through inertia. Sell what has value, donate what someone else could use, discard the rest. The rooms feel larger immediately. The cleaning takes half the time. You know where everything is because everything that remains has a purpose. Rule 3 is the one that has cost American households the most money in the last 20 years, and it barely existed as a concept before the smartphone era. Never upgrade out of boredom. Industry data suggests people now replace their phones roughly every 2.5 to 3 years on average. The previous phone, in the overwhelming majority of cases, works perfectly. If you keep doing that over several decades, the total cost can quietly reach tens of thousands of dollars once you factor in devices, accessories, and all the related purchases that follow an upgrade. Applied across every category where upgrade culture operates, cars, televisions, laptops, furniture, the lifetime waste for a typical household is genuinely staggering. There is a term psychologists use for the chain reaction that follows any upgrade: the Diderot effect, named after the French philosopher Denis Diderot, who received a beautiful new robe as a gift and then spent himself into debt replacing everything around it to match. The new phone makes the laptop feel outdated. The new laptop makes the desk feel wrong. The new desk makes the chair look shabby. One upgrade triggers an ecosystem of upgrades, none of which were necessary before the first one. Minimalists stop the chain at the source by maintaining a simple policy: replace something only when it genuinely cannot perform its function anymore. Boredom is not failure. The existence of a newer version is not failure. Actual inability to do the job is failure. Rule 4 is structural, and it is more powerful than any amount of willpower. Create friction for spending and remove friction for saving. Human behavior follows the path of least resistance. This is not a character flaw, it is how brains work, and your environment is constantly being designed by other people to exploit it. Shopping apps are engineered to minimize resistance between impulse and purchase. Retailers store your card details so the checkout takes 3 seconds. Marketing creates artificial urgency so you act before thinking. You are not fighting bad habits. You are fighting billion-dollar systems optimized to extract your money. The counter move is to engineer your environment in the other direction. Remove stored card numbers from retailer sites. Delete shopping apps from your phone. Unsubscribe from promotional emails. Implement a mandatory wait before any non-essential purchase over your personal threshold. Mine is $100. Yours might be different. Consumer behavior research consistently shows that adding even a short waiting period dramatically reduces impulsive buying because most desires are time-sensitive. The urge feels urgent in the moment and irrelevant 48 hours later. In my own tracking, the 24-hour rule eliminated the majority of my impulse purchases before I ever acted on them. On the savings side, automate transfers to happen on payday before you see the money. Set investment contributions as a fixed expense, not an afterthought. The goal is to make the right choice the easy choice, and the wrong choice require conscious effort. Rule 5 is one I borrowed from a Japanese organizational concept, though I have adapted it. Count your possessions in key categories regularly. Clothing, kitchen items, books you have not touched in a year. Write the number down. This sounds obsessive until you do it once and discover you own 47 shirts when you estimated 15. The count changes behavior in a way that abstract intentions never do. Once you know you own 47 shirts, buying 48 feels visibly ridiculous. You are not adding a shirt. You are extending a collection that already exceeds any reasonable use. Set thresholds. 1 in, 1 out for clothing. A maximum number of items and categories that tend to accumulate. These constraints create a friction that prevents the slow, invisible creep that undoes most financial progress. Lifestyle inflation rarely happens in dramatic episodes. It happens in increments so small they go unnoticed until you are suddenly spending $500 more per month than you were 3 years ago with no obvious explanation. Rule 6 is about sequence. Rent or borrow before you buy. Most items get used intensively for a short period and then enter the collection of things owned but barely touched. The excitement of a new interest fades in a predictable pattern. Minimalists test this pattern cheaply before committing to ownership. Want to try camping? Rent gear for the first 3 trips. Want to get into woodworking? Use a makerspace. Want a kayak? Rent on weekends for a season. You accomplish 2 things. First, you find out whether the interest is genuine or temporary before spending serious money. Second, you figure out exactly what you actually need rather than guessing. First-time buyers of almost anything consistently overpurchase because they do not yet know what matters. Rule 7 cuts through what I think is the most consistent source of lifestyle inflation for people with rising incomes. Define enough before you start earning more. The reason high earners frequently have nothing saved is that they never set a number. Without a definition, enough is always slightly more than whatever they currently have. Income goes up, lifestyle matches it, and nothing changes except the scale of the anxiety. The economist Richard Easterlin documented this pattern across decades of data. Beyond a baseline of genuine security and comfort, additional consumption contributes almost nothing to reported life satisfaction. People keep spending as though happiness scales linearly with spending. The evidence consistently shows it does not. Decide now what kind of home is actually sufficient. What car genuinely meets your transportation needs? What level of material comfort constitutes real satisfaction? Then, earn toward that target and let everything above it flow to investments. The person who defines enough at $60,000 a year in spending and then earns $120,000 is building $60,000 of wealth annually. The person earning the same $120,000 but perpetually redefining enough upward saves almost nothing. Same income, completely different outcomes because one person drew a line and the other never did. The last rule is about measuring the right thing. Stop measuring wealth by accumulation. Start measuring it by optionality. Bill Perkins frames this in his book, Die with Zero, as the central financial question of your life. Not how much have you saved, but what can you choose? Can you leave a job that is destroying your health? Can you take 6 months off for a family emergency? Can you say no to opportunities that pay well but compromise your values? Can you retire before the conventional age? These options are only available to people who have built margin between income and expenses. The person earning $200,000 but spending $195,000 has almost no optionality. They are trapped by their own lifestyle. The person earning $80,000 and spending $45,000 has extraordinary freedom to choose how they live. Every purchase is not just an exchange of money for an object. It is a trade of future options for present possession. The question to ask is whether the thing is worth the reduction in freedom it represents. Here is the practical application. This week, run the disappearance test on your home and identify 10 items you would not replace. Remove them. Notice what it feels like. This month, implement a mandatory waiting period before any non-essential purchase and track how many desires survive the wait versus how many evaporate. This quarter, count your possessions in 3 categories and set a maximum threshold for each one. Before your next raise, define enough across your major spending categories and write the number down. The person in that apartment I described at the beginning, the one earning $52,000 with 18 months of savings, is not more disciplined than Derek. They just found the rules earlier and let them run. The financial distance between those 2 people compounds every year they stay on their respective paths. The rules do not require sacrifice. They require clarity about what actually matters versus what just accumulated around you. The difference in outcome is the difference between owning your possessions and your possessions owning you. Subscribe for more of this, and I will see you in the next one.